Thank you, Oscar. So without further ado, let's begin because, oh, you just, can you enable me to share the screen, Oscar?
Um, I thought I did. All panelists. There you go.
Oh, thank you. Can everyone see my screen? I'm gonna get that here so I can see. Yes, yes. Thank you so much for letting me know. Beautiful. So tonight we are going to be talking about listening skills. I think in our field as a counselor, we might be prepared to be a good listeners, as we have been always emphasizing, and not only by us, but your supervisors, those are that are currently in an internship. So you're probably always asked to be careful and to always ask questions so that you are sure of your clients' um, request, or even just to clarify your own ideas whenever they are talking. So when I was actually creating this presentation, I thought about the importance of listening, and then I stopped and I was like, so what it means actually to listen from a very linguistic and natural way of thinking about listening. I started to play actually with the verb tenses and the different time tenses as well. So then this is me in my creativity. Then I started writing. So what is to listen? What is to be listening? What is to be listened to? Right? So even in the merely the fact of thinking, what is that action, and the power of each of listening and even thinking about the word in the different tenses changes the experience that you are having when you are in front of someone or an individual that needs your help, perhaps. So, and I even thought about the perfect tense, and I put it in my own. I used the first pronoun, and I thought I had been listening. And you probably will not know that, but I'm a second language learner. So of course I went through all the grammar and all that. And it occurred to me to think about the perfect tense and as a continuous action that is taking place that goes from a particular point in the past to even the moment that you are actually doing the action. And it was interesting to notice that listening, it's an ongoing process that will never stop once you decide to become a counselor, because will be constantly be asked to be paying attention, to be a listener of other people's story, to be the guardian of that story, um, or to do something with that information, whether this something is support the client, to be present with the client, to look for the resources the client may need. And all that can only take place when you are carefully present in that moment. Then, of course, I started thinking, so what elements are necessary for us to listen to other people? What elements are necessary for us to carry out this important activity, and more so to develop the skills? How does it get done? Are there multiple ways of listening? So all this, I started to come up with within me, and although there are beautiful explanations out there, what I attempted to do in this presentation is to begin exploring and experiencing listening from my very own humanity. And then I started to think, what's involved in the listening? And I couldn't help it other than to start thinking that one is a physiological act. One of your senses is engaged, biological and physiologically. Then, of course, it's a cognitive act. The mix together becomes a psychophysiological process that at the end of the day becomes a human act. A human actor requires you to be present, not only with your ear or with your abilities to comprehend what is being said to you, but as a process in which you are also engaged, a process that will take you to begin understanding what's happening to you in a precise moment that someone is required or asking you to be the listener. All those areas actually become very important as you develop yourself as a counselor. And of course, when we think about the human act of being a listener, it almost touches this field of spirituality that if you want to think about it, becomes energy. Am I fully present with my energy? Even at this very moment that you are listening to me, are you present? So it becomes a very interesting task to begin analyzing as a counselor, because the act of listening is not only a beautiful skill that the counseling field will teach you or your teachers, but it becomes a practice that requires a daily participation. It requires you to not only practice, but to become aware of what's happening to you inside when you are listening to other stories and when you are attempting to support others in the process. So of course, listening is a physiological act that requires your ear, a cognitive act that requires your comprehension and your abilities to put that together and making sense of what the client or the person in front of you are talking about, mainly a point of communication. So we have a general language in which we all must utilize to form a collective knowledge of what the person is saying. So what I'm saying is that we utilize a standard linguistic code in order to understand each other. When it comes to the humanity of the act, then we begin seeing the uniqueness of other people sharing with you this story. And what do I mean by that? Perhaps you have a client that, comes to you and cries all the time. Or if you don't have it, you will have it. And guess what? Even being present means listening to that client. But oftentimes we actually start limiting ourselves by believing that it is only through my ear that I can listen, when in fact multiple factors are involved. So of course, listening is a human act. It utilizes your sensory, your auditory sense. It utilizes your smell, your eyes, your taste, and even your touch at times. It utilizes all that, but even then it goes beyond just the five senses of your body. Yes, indeed, it takes more than that. So what it takes actually is your willingness to understand the other. And this is a beautiful approach to understand the otherness. Who are you? What do you want from me? Where are you coming from? What are you carrying with you? What experiences you are entrusting me to listen? And what does it mean to you to entrust me with those experiences? So it goes beyond your five senses. It goes to almost the point of experiencing the other suffering or happiness, of course, not only the suffering, that utilizes the doors into our body, your five senses. So how do we listen? This is very interesting. Have you ever heard about the term emic and etic? Those are actually beautiful terminology to describe two ways of looking at life and life experiences. And I decided to utilize those terms because it helps us to actually begin conceptualizing, if you're not conceptualizing, experiencing the idea that there is two ways in which I can look at the other person in front of me. And I'm using the word looking at as very loosely, because indeed I'm utilizing my eyes to look at someone. But in this, at least in this moment, I will invite you to begin imagining you looking as also a process of listening. It is not as simple as, what is the client saying? Can I ask a question to get a clarifying answer? Or can I ask a clarifying question? But it goes beyond that. Can I ask a question to listen to the answer based on what I'm looking at, based on someone tears coming from their cheeks and actually crying? Can I actually ask a clarifying question with the hope of getting an answer of what's the experience of the other? And we will see in a minute what emic and ethics means in a holistic way. But I don't know if there are questions, Oscar, before I continue, or is everyone clear?
I haven't seen anybody ask any particular questions, but I did want to comment on how this, when we were planning the semester out, Gerardo was telling me about some of the topics. I was really pleased to hear that this was going to be one of the first ones, because it cannot be overstated how important this is as a helper, as a counselor, as a therapist. And there's just so many, as you're talking about this, Gerardo, there's so many stories that come up for me in working with my clients, and also my own experience of becoming a helper and a healer, and recognizing the power of listening and to be truly present. And I think it boils down to the fact that human beings are always found where there's other human beings. We don't find human beings in isolation. And what that means is that we're not individual. We are individuals, but we are part of each other. And one way to experience ourselves is through others. And so when we tell our story, when we cry out loud, we do it for another to hear. We can hear our own thoughts, but there's something deeply necessary and mysterious and profound that happens when you tell another. You understand yourself better. You give yourself permission to heal, to change from one state of sadness to grief to healing. And the way you so eloquently put it, being the guardian of the story, Berta, which I thought was just beautiful, and it struck me. It reminds me of a quote by Carl Jung in Memories, Dreams, and Reflection, his autobiography that he wrote at 82. And he said that being truly hard can heals. And I thought, that's it. That's, I've been studying psychology and all these theories and all of the research and scholarship, and that's it. But it is. And if you learn to do it well, your clients will really appreciate it, and they'll come back, and when they're done, they'll be better for it. So I'll let you continue if there's no other questions, but feel free to type them in there, and I'll find a break to introduce your questions and your comments. And if you'd like to, of course, speak, just raise your hand and we'll get to you.
Thank you, Oscar. Indeed, it's a very profound process that takes place. Perhaps at this moment, many of you guys may think about it as just a simple task that is required and done in therapy. But as Oscar has pointed out, if you learn how to do it well, your clients will not need anything else. They will need that from you. And that is a work that it's already done, because they will come back to you for it. So I wanted to clarify a little bit about ethic and emic. Those are two beautiful terms. Ethic refers to this ability of what we bring from the outside And indeed, those are two anthropological terms, but I love to use them because what we are seeing in the listening process, or in the process of developing our skills, is that when I'm listening to something or to someone, what is happening is that we receive the outside perspective, but there is always something inside of us that filter all that information and becomes an emic. The other part that interprets, the other part that comes out from me, the other part that is playing a role in what I do. So, and both of them come together to formulate a reality. I do make the distinction between a reality and the truth. I profoundly believe that when nobody has the truth, but we all have our own reality. And our reality is valid in every single instant in our life. So when you begin actually creating a reality according to what you are observing and you are listening to, or whoever the person is in front of you, truly what you are creating is your own. You as a clinician are formulating an idea of who is in front of you based on what is given to you, the input from the outer world, and utilizing your very own self, the inner self, to create your own and then merge them together. Um, a beautiful colleague of mine will used to say, that's interpretation. It's a little more than interpreting. This goes even deeper to begin calling it intuition that is based on everything that you have experienced. This is when you connect to others. You don't connect to others because they are telling you the story. You connect with others because somewhere in some year, in some moment in your life, the story is very similar to yours. And even if you don't remember it, still present, so you connect. So the emic approach, or what I will call the inward listening, it's actually the process in which I engage in a highly state of awareness when I'm with a client and I'm thinking, and I'm not present because I'm noticing the temperature of the room, or because the lighting is so high, or because I have seen so many clients through the day that I can no longer focus. So what is truly happening is my own listening. My body is actually bringing up information to you as a clinician, or as an intern, as a student, to begin realizing, or even as a human being. Your body is a perfect machine that will let you know what's going on if you pay attention and you are listening carefully to it. So some of the reactions that I used to have at the beginning of the career was getting lost in my thoughts when someone was in front of me, or my clients. I used to start thinking and idealizing and making plans of how we can actually process the experience and making others feel happy, or even inviting them to the change. But that was actually not what they were looking for. They were looking for me to be present.
Yeah, there's nothing more hurtful when you're opening yourself up, making yourself vulnerable, telling people your deepest pain, and noticing they're looking at the clock, or they're wiggling around in their chair, or you just notice they're not there. And what we typically do, as we're trained to do in polite society, is just neglect our thoughts. And this is what gets people into problems to begin with. And they don't understand their thoughts, their feelings, their experience, their process. So we have to stay in there and be present to allow them free expression of that. And like, it's the most important thing in the world, because it really is for them. And it's so necessary. I can't overstate it, and I'll keep stating it, but I just wanted to kind of ornament some of Dr. Wentz's very learned and eloquent words.
Thank you, Oscar. And guess what, guys? This is not to criticize ourselves. I truly believe it's the beginning phases of our careers. But as you continue practicing more and more and more, and you practice in being present, Oscar has pointed it out, we suppress our thoughts, not because we do it harshly, we make them be present and let them go while I continue paying attention. We let them manifest, we don't fight, and they go. And of course, I have had people that say, so how do we do that, right? It is my goal that tonight you will experience this in a beautiful activity that I have at the end, so that you can see how we start doing this. But it cannot be explained. It needs to be experienced. The only thing we do here is to, or the only thing I'm doing here is to provide you with, in a way, what has been my experience, but inviting you to continue learning for yourself. This is going to get better as you continue, but the first step is for you to start noticing how your beautiful mind travels when you're in front of someone. Because we live, indeed, mindfulness is a beautiful approach to do this, for sure, Marceline, that's right. So the idea is that whenever you experience this, please do not defeat yourself. This is just the process that it takes in order for us to continue developing our skills as a clinicians, or as a, if you're not as a clinician, at least as a good listener to your friends, to your family. And I can guarantee you that more than often, they will say thank you to you because nobody has listened to them as you are. Presence is important. So that's you, right? Inside, you're also listening. Meanwhile, of course, there is something else happening. You have a client in front of you that is continuously bombarding you with information, that is continuously sending you input to your brain so you can catch up every single statement I'm making in order for you to make a clear idea what's happening. But do not forget, in order to observe the other, your five senses are engaged. Very unlikely you will use the touch, but there are moments in which a client of mine are crying so much and I get close to them and touch very slightly their shoulders. So of course, it's part of it. So in order to listen to the other, you will need to listen with your entire body. You will need to listen with your five senses. You will need to be fully present to notice their phenomenology. What is phenomenology? Nothing but the experience of the individual in front of you. And that experience may include ideas, may include the movement of their body, may include, the color of their skin when they are sharing a story with you, may notice when the tears are getting watery, noticing their entire experience. That's what's phenomenology. Your ability to be present, to notice the experience of the other is indeed a process of listening outwards. And then, the linguistic elements come handy. What is my client saying? What is my client retelling the story that we just discussed last week? Or if you are very attentive, you will notice that your clients will change the tense of the statements. So maybe when they come to you, they are in the present time saying, I hate this person so much, and this person did this to me, and I cannot forgive this person. And then as you continue working, if you are not very attentive, you probably will lose the fact that they told you, I was resentful, but not anymore. So even catching up those subtle responses and verbal responses from your client indicates that you are paying attention and that you are listening carefully to what they are communicating to you.
Yeah, and when you offer that perfect reflection, one of the best things that we can do as therapists is be perfect mirrors, to hold kind of an X-ray up to the client and say, this is your internal experience. And just as you mentioned, I can hear from what you're saying is that you were deeply hurt and resentful, but not anymore. And they'll say, yes, yes, yes. And they feel such a sense of belonging, comfort, acceptance, being seen. And that is such a healing experience for them.
Beautiful, indeed. And this connects with your comment, Oscar. If you are listening, ask yourself, can I summarize what my client has said? It is a check-in moment for you as a clinician. Because if you cannot, that means that you probably were traveling inwards and you were actually thinking about what's happening to you, which is not bad. I will never call it a bad experience. It's indeed a process, because as you continue noticing this more often, what is going to trigger is the progression, is your growth as a clinician, as a human being that can be present to listen. You know, I have friends that always tell me, why would I pay you to come to your office for you to listen to me? And I love answering to them, because the way I listen is very different from your friends in the office, because it's different in nature.
Mm-hmm.
That is why, for those that are in intern position right now, I don't know if it has happened to you that there are days in which you just end exhausted.
Yeah.
Because it requires a lot of energy. It requires your essence to be active constantly in order to support others. This is what we do as the clinicians. We don't listen like friends. We'll listen to try to approach the experience of the other. And that is a lot of work. So if you have friends that say, why would I pay you? Please tell them that, because I'm listening very differently.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that many of us do when somebody comes to us in distress or complains is we have our own thoughts, and you know, we might be getting together after work for a meal or something, and you'll say, oh, I've been there, oh, I've been there. That's a way of dismissing their experience, saying, I know exactly what you went through, but you have no idea what they went through. Or when somebody in your family dies, they'll say, oh, I remember when my grandmother died. So now it's about them. These are things that people do kind of, I would say, laymen do as a means to comfort each other. And then they also try to solve the problem when they weren't asked to, and moving really too fast, and just, you know, not allow the healing process to kind of open up and start that. Because you want to think human beings do not heal when we are in different states. We do it when we're relaxed, when we're safe, when we feel comfort and trust with the person. We can't do it in the midst of another crisis from someone else's situation, or when the moment doesn't feel right. We have to open the person up, so to say, like a flower. It has to be a gradual unfolding, and then they get to deeper parts of themselves and their own experience and say, you know what, I think I've been holding this in for so long, like a pit in my stomach, and it's making me sick, or whatever, you know, whatever realization that they experience. And then you haven't done anything but just support that process, that natural human process. And I would say that this was the role in previous times, and maybe in some cultures and societies still is. It was the role of the clergy, of the church, and beyond that, back of that, it was the shaman of the village compound, or the medicine man. And we carry that torch of that role in our society, and it's a great responsibility and a tremendous honor, and one I think that is a noble profession, but it doesn't come without some effort to make ourselves ready for it.
With a lot of effort, Oscar, I will say.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of work, for
it
sure.
does. Becoming a therapist takes years and years and years. Yeah, to be sure.
Awesome. I wanted to share with everyone that I have a young man as a client, and I have been working with this young man for, I will say, 8 months now. And, you know, I was reaching the point of understanding whether I was helping this human being or not. And then suddenly one day, this young man comes to my office, sits on the couch and say, I'm just going to tell you everything. So he just let it all out. And it took us 8 months to get to a specific moment and precise timing. Very similar to what Oscar was saying. It's a process, but a process that has been building up from showing constant continuity, that has been showing this individual that I'm here, whatever you want to tell me. And even if you don't want to tell me anything, I'm here anyway. So I'm here. So when the precise and a beautiful moment was to be occurred, what happened is that he felt re-alleviated. So we are quick in believing that we were not doing anything because nothing was happening for a month. And then you start realizing it was indeed happening. I had been listening for 8 months. So don't never give for granted what is happening, even with the simplicity and yet powerful skill of listening. At times you don't even need a technique. It's just that. So powerful. So what do we have after all though? Well, what we have is actually a physiological process that utilizes my senses that transform into a cognitive process in which I need to utilize all my resource, mental resource, including your information, knowledge, experiences, in order to filter everything that has been given to me to begin listening to the other. And remember, we are constantly listening by utilizing all our senses. Without that input to your body, you cannot actually understand what's happening. So it is a beautiful bi-directional process. When we listen, not only we are listening our inner selves, we are listening to the other person, but the other person is also listening to us. It becomes a beautiful dynamic that if you are not attending to, or if you are not listening to, or you are not looking at it, you can miss the important ingredients. So innerly, outerly, and then here it is, reality formulates, but not the client's reality. It could be yours. When you check with the client about the reality that you have formulated from the listening and the absorption of all the information, the client then will say, you nail it. Is there? Oh, they can come and say, oh no, you are wrong in what you are saying. And it's fair enough because they are actually the ones that will tell you their reality. You can formulate one because we have these beautiful skills that we are developing. But at the end of the day, they are the ones that will tell you.
I have a question here from an anonymous attendee. And I'll ask the question. May I ask, what happens if your client comes in for yours before that moment? How do you determine progress versus comfortability? And I think to maybe clarify the way I understand it is whether you're going to continue to move forward or just continue to listen, or, you know, I think that's the gist.
Great question. I have to, I'm going to be open and transparent to all of you. We live in a society that prepares us to believe that we must see the change and the progress. It's just the natural way that we are developed, meaning people are telling you, agencies are telling you, your boss is telling you, even us as teachers, right? We tell you, you gotta see progress, you gotta see change. But how do you know that the person that feels comfortably with you is not making progress? If an individual keeps coming to you, it's because indeed you are adding ingredients to it. It will be interesting to explore what he's gaining out of it. Of course, I'm not going to say just continue listening and not be an active agent of the process, because that doesn't happen. That's when other skills in the counseling process comes handy. You will need to assess that and ask, am I helping you? And clients are good in telling you if you are a good support or not. I can guarantee you they are good.
And this first symposium is on the basic listening sequence, and the second symposium will explore the stages of the counseling
Absolutely.
process.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's a great question, but that's not where we're going to leave it, obviously. So we'll have more to add to that conversation on our next symposium. So stay tuned.
Absolutely. But you know, as I was listening to the question, I guess the element of should I continue listening? That will be a question for your client. Would you like me to continue listening to you? Because I have been sitting here for 2 years and I'm wondering if it is helpful for you.
Mhm.
Let them share that with you. And of course, just so that I move on to the next slide, if you have a particular type of clients that are only looking for that companionship because it's my session and I want to enjoy it with my therapist, and that's the only thing I care, then of course you as a therapist have the responsibility to stop that. But once again, we make the determination until we assess that with our client or the individual in front of us. Mhm.
Kim has another comment. Couldn't progress be measured in other areas than opening all the way up? For example, hygiene, improved appearance, mood, affective improvement, etc.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. That is why we need to be very attentive and with ear opens, because if your client comes and say, you know, I never take a shower, but the other day I was thinking about taking a shower. Oh my God, you are already thinking. But guess what? Because it took us 3 months to get to the thinking, we believe that we are not doing the best we can. And
Yeah.
indeed we are, because now our client is mobilized to think about taking a shower.
Mhm.
And isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, there's movement happening. There's
Mhm.
they're eliciting their own change, and that's really what we're getting to. We're not pulling people towards change. We're supporting them in their own process of change. Um,
And and guys, I'm gonna be very honest. I do understand that in real life we are challenged by our workplace. We are challenged by our boss. We are challenged by the amount of clients that are given to us. That's a reality. That's not gonna change. But what I would like to give today to you is not the challenge to challenge the system, but to begin profoundly believing that when you listen to other human beings, the healing, the change, and everything you desire for that person manifests. But it's only until you profoundly believe in your ability to be present with your five senses, until you profoundly begin understanding what's happening in your mind. And you begin understanding that your mind travels when someone is in front of you. And you begin understanding that your face turns red when a topic is challenged. That's listening to you and listening to the other. This is why the experience is beautiful. Yes, of course, you know, you need to do treatment plan, and you need to reach the goals, and then we need to actually tell Medicaid, yes, the client is making progress, and what have you. That is clear to me. And we are not going to change the system just yet. But my invitation for you is to profoundly believe um, in what you are doing as a listener, because of the the energy and the powerful impact of that skill is non it's on the it's not to be negated. It's powerful.
there's a couple questions here and comments. Michelle mentioned that it's important to support their healing timeline. And Timothy asks, what's the best way to approach what about Bob's situation? As the client is maybe going too far, becoming too familiar. This is something that we hold professional boundaries. We explain the limits of the relationship. And of course, we are not obligated to see anybody just because they want to. And if they act inappropriate or don't have, then they might be better served being referred to a higher level of care that can manage the kinds of presenting symptoms. So if they can't, outpatient therapy is like outpatient medical treatment. You go because you drive yourself there and pay and things like that. If somebody's unconscious and they're in a hospital and they're bleeding out, well, you're going to have to send them to higher level of care. So sometimes when patients present and their level of presentation is inappropriate for the outpatient setting, they'll have to go to another type of treatment if it's available.
I also want to share this story with you because I think it's going to be useful. Once again, the story that I'm going to share comes from a professional with experience. That would be me. So it's not to say that you need to submit yourself to this if you don't feel comfortable. But a long time ago, I had a client that wanted to stop using crack. He came to my office and the first session was nice. And the second session, he turned actually very offensive in terms of the vocabulary he was using, in terms of, how he was actually talking to me. At that point, I could have opted to say, I can't deal with this. I cannot see you, and send him his way. But in one moment, he even called me the F word. But when he realized that I was listening, he even asked me, so are you afraid? When he realized that my objective was not to judge him, that I was not going to just, stop, because this is what he was trying to do, stop the process, and for me to kick him out and say, I don't want to see you again. But when you remain there and start listening behind the idea of calling me the F word and being super negative and just, not wanting to be there and all that, there was a human being that was in pain. And he was so much in pain that the only thing that he could do was to be aggressive. So the idea is, yes, you can choose to work with whoever you want. Nobody is going to force you. It's whether you want to be a listener and be present and hear more than what is being said through the words. Now, of course, as I consult the case with other person, the idea came out of, were you afraid of your physical safety? Of course I was. I'm a human being. Of course. But then I actually listened to myself and I said, I can kick him out. I can panic, or I can try to see what he needs in this moment. Beautifully, it worked out in my benefit because the client actually remained there and we built up a beautiful relationship and he went to the talks and all that. But the point being is, you can choose.
Right. You don't have to respond to your egocentric programming. You can suspend your ego, your will and willingness to be respected, and all the things that go along with who I think I am, and say, you know what, I'm in a special situation. I'm in a position to help this individual. I'm sure they do this all the time. And let me see if I can change up the dynamic here. And it reminds me of the story that I saw in a lecture of how human beings interact. And it was this mirror that was kind of resting up against a wall, and a little kitten walks in front of the mirror and it sees the reflection and thinks it's another cat or another kitten. And so it looks, and then it shows aggression, and of course the reflection shows aggression, and then the cat starts going at it and at it and at it. This is how we go. If I raise my voice, other people tend to raise their voice. If I quiet, if I talk slower, I can affect the mood. And mood and affect is something like the emotion expressed, like happiness, sadness, joy. Mood is like the environment, the storm, what's happening in this, what's the weather like in this room, emotionally, you could say. And so then at some point, this little kitten realizes something's amiss and goes behind the mirror looking for the other and realizes there's nobody there. And if we keep reacting this way, we're going to get stuck into the same pattern. We're going to be drawn into the client's process, and instead of being a professional and be able to hold ourselves at center and not get pulled into their world. And then it won't be very much help to the client any more than anyone else has. So I really appreciate that story, because it is something we have to check ourselves. And like, do I need to get upset in the situation? Can I affect change in another way?
And I'm gonna tell you guys, the funny part is that when we started developing the relationship and rapport, you know, in later sessions, I told him, I was like, man, I was petrified that day.
Right.
So, but once again, guys, if you don't feel comfortable, I'm not saying you should not be safe. Safety is the first thing. I'm just sharing what I did, because I think it just emphasizes this idea of I am willing to listen to you. Just let's do it in a particular way in which you can feel safe, and you can calm down. So of course, you know, after, you know, breathing and say, okay, you know, let's check in how we feel. The session went kind of a high in energy. Of course, he left my office and slammed the door, and then he calls me and say, can I meet you again? And I'm like, okay. So here it is what I'm saying to you. Whatever way you choose to listen to your client, whether it's active or empathetic, the most important part is that you are willing to. If in your head you have already a preconcept bias or ideas a priori about the individual, that is actually for you to listen to yourself. Who is this client? Mm-hmm. Oh my God, this is what I have read about individuals that use crack. Right. Am I scared already? This is listening to yourself as well, not what is coming only from the outer world. So you got to be present to understand. Now, when I started as a clinical case manager, of course, one of my clients, the sufferer of depression and anxiety, and then of course later on was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, attempted to strangulate me the second day of my job. Did I panic? Of course I did. That was my second day after the bachelor's degree in psychology. So the idea is this: can we learn? Yes, we can. Do we have to be safe? Yes, you do. I'm not going to minimize that. You protect yourself, you feel safe. It's just me trying to share with you the idea of we can gain a lot when we listen.
Yeah, and statistically, people suffering from mental illness are no more violent than anybody in the population. Correct. So you're taking the same amount of risk. People will say, oh, you know, people with schizophrenia, they don't know. They're, in my experience, unless you know, if you kind of pressure people to react, they don't tend to. You give them space. You don't need to solve the problem. Don't ask, why are you acting this way? That's like the number one thing to piss people off. Like, okay, so I'm, you know, reflecting and listening is a great way to diffuse. I can hear you're really angry. I'm wondering what has it led you here? What can I do? Is there something that you'd like to tell me to help me understand? There's so many ways to change that. Now, when I'm walking down the street in downtown Las Vegas, where I live, I'm a completely different person. Okay, I'm not that nice therapist. I'm gonna take the environment into account. I'm going to monitor my surroundings. But our offices are a sacred place of healing, and they affect change in that way. Just like when you walk into a church, you feel different. You've been taken out of your normal environment, and you're in another world that allows a different psychic space. This is why it's important to have a clean, comfortable office too, pleasant.
Awesome. So, of course, you know, like we need, as human beings, we need concretity and we need concrete terms and all that. So I'm gonna give you elements that are necessary in this listening process, right? Or the listening sequence. We need attending behaviors. Your eyes. I'm actually looking at my clients. My vocal qualities. Yeah, if you are a therapist that are constantly speaking like that, and then you don't change your tone, and then you're like, how does that feel to you? Ah, okay. And you keep doing that, I would be like, oh gosh, what's happening?
This is something new therapists do. They try to mimic some kind of, I don't know, Hollywood version of a therapist they see me and say, "Oh, hello, how are you?" And I'm not anything like. Use your personality. And he mentioned that the best thing that we can offer our clients is ourselves and our genuine selves, not this veneer of a polished professional who's here to listen. And I'll, talk this way in a very monotone, dispassionate way. This person's gonna be like, I ain't telling you shit. This is not a
That's
real,
actually
this is
what
not a real
happened.
person in front of me. This is a stuffed shirt. This is not, and so in order for them to open up, we have to be real, authentic, genuine. And we'll get to that. Sorry, I don't want to get ahead.
No, it's fine. Kim, I'm reading your post, and it's absolutely fascinating. You were scared of a little 7-year-old, but he didn't scare you. I love it. You got scared. He didn't. So how beautiful it is when we remain present and start thinking, wait a minute, what is this beautiful kid wanting from me, right? And you just remind me of the story when I work in schools. There was this beautiful kid that suffered of autism. One day he decided to throw a tantrum in the middle of the hallway and refused to move. So of course, as a clinical counselor, I was calling to solve the situation. So I couldn't solve it. So I throw myself on the floor and I start kicking too. So suddenly he turns his face to me and I turn my face to him, and he looked at me for a while and then he calmed down. He terrified everyone because, oh my God, a kid is throwing a tantrum. Well, throw yourself. See how it feels from inside, right? So another important thing, as I have mentioned before, verbal tracking. Is the client changing the topic? Why is the client changing the topic? We were talking about what happened in the past, and now suddenly is the boyfriend of the girlfriend, and now we are going back to the traumatic event. So what's happening? I want to know. Tense change. Is the timing of the change of the tenses changing? Is there a progression in how you are dealing with the healing? Body language, very, very important. Is my client turning red when he or she talks about specific topics? Oh, I want to know what's that about. Oh, I just said your face turning red. What's that about? Oh, let me tell you, that's a topic that we don't talk in my culture. Oh, okay, I got it.
Mhm. There was a question that I missed, and
Oh,
somebody else tried to answer it or answered it, and I would like to give that some attention. Rachel said, "My psychology class, we are discussing listening and as well. What technique of listening would you try to focus on, active or empathic, in those situations of resistance?" So let's think about what we mean by resistance. That's a term that is borrowed from behavioral psychology, and then it's applied across all kinds of spectrums of psychological thoughts, theories, scholarship, and research. So we have to kind of define that. And I hear it overused in clinical settings. We'll say, "Oh, the client is resistant," and what I feel is that we're using the wrong approach. I think of taking that energy and thinking kind of like a judo. When somebody's coming at you, you take that energy and you turn it around, and you're not going to throw them into the other room. But I think that the word judo means the way, the gentle way. So how do you handle that? And by diffusing it, absorbing it, putting it back, and sometimes you will by reflecting. You're angry, and that's making me afraid. Is that your intention? Something like that. Just naming what's happening. And so I think it depends on the situation. But I don't, in most cases, now not always, when you feel your gut kick in, you're like, I'm in danger, run with it, go. Get out of there. There are times it happens. I worked in acute psychiatric, and there were patients that attacked people and hurt people and all kinds of terrible things that we had to deal with in those settings. But what I noticed is that if I backed off, no matter how agitated and confrontational and violent, what we were trying to take people down, like physically. And I'm like, just give me 5 minutes with them. And I'd stand there and I'd back up instead of going towards them. And I'd sit on the floor and like, okay, let's just talk, you know? And they would kind of realize it's kind of like engaging the instincts of an animal. If you come at them, they're going to do one of the three things they can do: fight or flight or freeze, right? And so humans are animals too, and we will react that way when we're cornered. Or if I run, they might chase out you. They tell you when you engage well, don't run, because the animal said, "Oh, he's running. I guess I'm supposed to chase him." There we go, and now we're off. So it's important to just kind of back away, and control the situation instead of reacting. But it does depend on the situation. So there's not a generic answer that I could give, and I hope that kind of clarifies.
And I agree with you, Oscar. It depends on the situation. So most of the time I can share with you that I attempt to use empathy as my source of helping others. Other times I'm human, of course, and that human inside of me have multiple emotions. So they will come up, and what can I do, right? I do get angry, I do get sad, I do get depressed and all that. So it just depends on the situation, Rachel. Your question is beautiful. You just need to be attentive to how it feels for you. Remember, the listening is not only for the client, but also listening to yourself. This idea of pack and leave because this is not actually safe, then listen to it, right? But if it is not necessarily unsafe and there is this customer reaction of, I'm just going to leave because this is what I read about these individuals, then truly what we are dealing with is the ideas a priori that we have formulated that fuel our fears. So it all depends on the context and situation. So empathy, of course, is absolutely necessary. And what is empathy? The experience in the client's world and his story as you were the client. I have a challenge with this type of definition, but I put it there because it's kind of artificial, of course. But in my own experience, there is an impossibility of experience the other full experience. You can never, ever, ever experience the other in its totality, but you can get closer. And one way of getting closer is by attending, by watching your voice and how the client is responding, by noticing the topic change, by noticing the body response, the temperature of the individual through the color red in their face, by the tears coming down, by the tears and the laugh that manifest simultaneously. I can actually get closer to the client experience, but I recognize that I will never experience a client's lived experience. That's just not possible. But I can get closer enough to feel it. And we will do an activity and you will tell me how it feels in a minute. So moving on, observation skills, absolutely necessary. You need to be attentive. And this is part of listening, of course, because if you don't see what the client is doing, if you don't see the facial expressions, if you don't see how the client always accuses others and never use the I, if you can't hear that, if you are not able to understand it, how can you be listening, right? Very important. So, but, I want to share this activity with you. And the only thing I'm going to ask you to do is listening to the following song. That's all, nothing more. Oh, well, yeah, a couple more things. As you are listening, pay attention if your mind is trying to guess what the song is saying. As you are listening, pay attention to see if you are being challenged by the song. As you are listening, see how it feels to you. Is it a familiar? Is it something that hurts? Is it something that appears to be happy? Is your mind trying to interpret it? And then we will come back after the activity. Hold on one second. So, sorry, I click again. It's not stopping.
Yeah, it won't stop till you move the.
Okay, so I'm gonna
Change
go
the
back. I'm gonna go back to the previous one, so the music stops, and then I will forward to the next slide. But I want you to actually share with us when you are listening to something that you don't understand. How are you listening to it?
Yeah, go ahead and type some responses, guys.
Mhm.
I can give my own experiences hearing it. To me, it sounded like a celebration. The context, what's the tempo like? What's the inflection in the voice? Obviously, this is a language I don't understand, so I'm getting that kind of sunny feeling, that cheerful. That was my experience.
Happy. I love some of the responses are beautiful. The tone of voice, the tempo, the heart beating. Close my eyes, taking it in. So this is part of listening. And guess what? I actually choose a song where which language I couldn't understand. So and here is me, to be honest. I tried to search for the translation. It's not existent. Even using Google Translate didn't give me the answer, which is very interesting. So I did some historical research on the song. And the interesting part is that you got to research a lot in order to put it together. And of course, I'm not going to tell you what it is because I want you to listen to the next one. But here it is. I want you to listen with your ears and with your eyes. Don't
Gerardo, before you start,
uh-huh.
in the share screen settings,
Uh-huh.
there's a optimize for audio clip or video clip. If you click that, it will get a better sound quality through the meeting.
Through, let's see, where do you say, Oscar?
When you hit share screen, there's a little menu that opens up, and in that there's it's called optimize for video clip or audio clip or something like that. Or and share sound. Make sure you click on share sound.
Sure. Okay. Oh, okay. So share sound. Is that the one?
Yeah, and then there's also an optimize for a video clip or.
Beautiful. So I click there, right?
Yeah, just because we're getting a little bit of cut out and cut in.
Got it. I love it, Trisha. I was trying to understand the language overall. So your energy was geared towards understanding the language. That's listening, and it's awareness, because that it means that we are constantly putting our energy in a particular task. In your case, it was understanding. In other people's case, I just want to hear my beat. In other cases, the tone, the beat, all that. So beautiful. So now with your eyes and your ears, okay?
Maluyo, nyekumala maluma, nyekumala maluma, maluyo, nyekumala maluma. Musuye somale bangelana. Musute que Somalie, Musuye Somale Bangela, Musute que Somalie, Maluyo, Yekumala Maluma, Maluyo, Yekumala Maluma, na Maluyo.
So now I'm gonna go back so that the sound doesn't start, and then we will continue advancing. Oscar, do I need to?
No, everything's fine. It'll just keep going.
Oh, okay, beautiful. So here it is what I tried to do with this beautiful experience. This is how we listened. There are times in which we will not be able to understand because the experience of the other is just something that requires my full presence. As you continue adding elements to the story through your eyes, although I'm not understanding the words, something is manifesting and I can feel it. I can feel the tradition behind that. I can see that huge desert that, embraces human beings. And as I keep adding the color, as I keep adding the movement of the individuals, as I keep adding elements that help me to understand the other, what I'm engaging into is in the activity of comprehending the existence of the other. I'm not going to try to interpret it. I'm just going to get closer and closer to it. So the idea of listening is not to change anyone, is to allow the other to manifest so you can approach to their experiences, and therefore they can recognize the healing by themselves just by you. Of course, next time we will do some of the technique, or use some of the techniques in the counseling phases. But this first one is absolutely essential, the listening. Because the reality that you formulate from what you are obtaining is yours. And the only thing I can do is to be present. I thought it would sound like the loss of celebration of life. Interesting, yes. So here it is, another activity that is gonna take us a minute or two for us. So Bachelard is a philosopher that told us that it's through the space and the human creation we can experience the other without the need of interpreting it. But because we are humans, we are constantly wanting to interpret. the paintings. Have you ever seen yourself going actually into a museum and staring at a painting and say, oh, why the blue color? Oh, why this line? Why that other line? Why the artist did that? According to Bachelor, what we are doing is destroying the experience, because truly at the moment that you begin questioning, you stop the experience. So here it is for you alive. I want you to think, I want you to feel how it feels to look at this picture, okay? And of course, notice if your mind wants to ask questions about it. Type on in the text how you feel when you look at it. Mhm. Awesome. How about the next picture? Mhm. All those different experiences that you're having by looking at a picture didn't require for you to ask, why that color? Why is those, little music notes being written there? You didn't ask that. You just look at it and you start manifesting how you felt. This is what it's to listen, to be present and allow the other to manifest how they feel. Do we ask clarifying questions? We do in our profession. I'm not going to say we don't, but the questions are created so that the individual continues manifesting their experiences. This is what it is to listen, just to be there, to be attentive, to feel how it feels inside of you, to begin listening to your thoughts as you are actually listening to the other individual's sentences, to be present, to utilize every drop of energy to track the phenomenology of their bodies. That is to listen, an essential skill that is absolutely necessary for our profession. So, do you listen? Are you listening? How is to listen to? I forgot to add the to at the end. Those are the main questions that I would like to leave for tonight. Am I present listening? I am always listening. How do we want to do the listening? And I think we have covered all that tonight. So I wanna Oscar, I don't see you anymore.
I'm here.
Okay, so that's what I have for all of you tonight. Any questions that you may have for me about listening? And before you ask me questions, I want to let you know that I purposely never told you how to do the listening, yet it was embedded within, because listening is an art that you must develop with your beautiful uniqueness and qualities as a human being. So think about it. You are unique. How you take that uniqueness and implement your own listening? That's what I would like you to live with tonight. There are no recipes, there are not structures, there is no instructions. Maybe the beginning will be from your teachers to tell you how to, but later on, develop your style, develop your own personality in the listening process. Give your essence to it. So
Before we go, the password for attending the presentation, which you'll put in your assignments for those of you that are attending their human services in our human service classes, is Songbird. The password is Songbird. I wrote it in the chat. Just put that into your assignment and to get credit for attending this evening. Thank you guys so much for being here and giving us your attention, and Dr. Wence-Munoz for such a wonderful presentation. I really appreciate it. And
thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful rest of your night, and practice self-care. Don't forget that.
Sounds great. Thank you all. Have a good evening.